and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, 11 for 11, 11 Leading Planning Best Practices for 2011. My name is Mark McNeela. I am a Business Development Director here at MarketSphere, and I am serving as the host today. MarketSphere is a Oracle Platinum partner and has proven itself as a leader in Oracle solutions across the Enterprise Performance Management, BI, and the ERP suite of applications. Today I'm happy to have with me Brian Ecker, partner from MarketSphere with me today. Brian Ecker is responsible for the advancement of MarketSphere's Hyperion planning practice, including service strategy, thought leadership, market performance, and project delivery. Through a decade of engagements, Brian has developed deep experience in the financial and enterprise performance management fields. His areas of specialty include enterprise planning, process improvement, dashboards and scorecarding, budgeting, forecasting, and management reporting. At this time, let me turn this over to Brian Ecker now.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And good afternoon, good morning to everyone, depending on where you're currently sitting at this point. Appreciate everyone taking the time to attend today's session. As you'll see currently, we're going to walk through 11 leading practices. And the purpose of today is to provide information that's very common for our clients to come to us with, which is we're able to see a lot of different companies, clients of different sizes, different industries, and different levels of experience within the planning, both the technology as well as the process. The question is, what are leading companies doing? And it moves beyond the theory of best practice. Often best practices limited to the theoretical realm with just an example or two of companies that have actually been able to achieve it. For us, we look to leading practices, which is a balance of what is new, what is practical, and what can actually be implemented. So as we walk through these 11 leading practices, there's two other items I ask you to keep in mind. One is these leading practices are adopted over time. As you look at each one, you'll realize they can be sequenced specific to your business, your needs, and that improving your planning process and underlying technology is a bit of a journey. It's not something that's accomplished in one swoop, but instead of something that needs to be planned for and advanced over time. The second is all of these practices apply to whether or not you're implement a new planning system or process, or if you're an existing Oracle Hyperion customer that have planning, that have been using it, and are looking for opportunities to take it to the next level. So over the next 30 to 40 minutes here, we'll be walking through these 11 planning leading practices, and hopefully you'll be able to learn some new items along the way. So the first one is design with the end in mind. You've probably heard this referred to in other settings as well, but what it speaks to is as consultants, when we come to analyze your planning process and adapt it to the new technology, we're often presented with your existing input templates. And more often than not, the initial discussions are all around the existing input templates. However, what we challenge you to do is to actually put the input templates at the end and instead begin by looking at your reporting needs. The reason is because your existing input templates, while an excellent baseline of information, do have some inherent limitations. To begin with, they've been designed, they've been built around to feed a specific system. And for most individuals, that's your general ledger. And that general ledger will naturally have certain biases or limitations around it. The biggest being, it's whatever your segments are in your chart of accounts. And why does that matter? Well, for many of our clients that are looking to implement driver-based planning, to expand their reporting to include customer product information, there's going to be key elements that aren't necessarily present within your general ledger. Products, customers, projects, valuable information that more often than not you're having to source for your reporting needs, but do not exist within the general ledger. Secondly is when you look at where leading practices are taking you, and the focus around such items as revenue, as understanding project cost and project expense, issues around workforce and planning at the human level. Those all come from data sources and information that are not currently housed within your general ledger and likely may not be reflected into the input templates that you utilize today. Often it could be emails or subsequent information that's gathered on an on-demand basis. So what we begin this all with is say, look at your reporting. Design the reporting that you need to do to understand the variances and how to guide your business. That in turn will drive the dimensionality. It will drive what are the elements that need to be within our process and our systems to get us the reporting that we need. Then end up at your existing input templates. Your existing input templates will be very valuable to understand, first of all, any data that you collect today needs to be collected in the future. Moving on to the second one, which is the process. And so it is often that when we're brought in, it's to discuss the budget. And the irony of that is, for most of our clients, budget is a one-time event. Now, it may be a rather lengthy event, but it's certainly, hopefully, a one-time event throughout the year. However, forecasting, depending upon your situation, can occur quarterly, can occur monthly. In a number of industries and clients, forecasting occurs every single week. But the initial push is often the budget. Yet, if you take a look back, why do we start with an item that occurs the least amount of time? Instead, we encourage our clients to standardize with the forecast. Make your baseline process your forecast. What is it that you need to be able to put in place that you can repeat multiple times? You will hear throughout this webcast today a lot around speed and the need for speed. So standardize on a forecast process that's quick, sustainable, and gives you the information you need. When it comes to the budget is a major control factor. There are certain items that we do not want to look at every single month, every single quarter necessarily, or every single week. Capital projects is a great example. Workforce in terms of salary increases, changes, benefit changes, those are not realistically items that you're going to look at holistically on an ongoing monthly basis. They are meant to be control factors to occur on an annual basis. And where does that bring you to? It brings you to a point that if you can envision a large gear turning, that's your forecast process that occurs, again, at whatever desired interval. From there, adding on a smaller gear, which is the budget, which is essentially saying, at this specific point in time, we need to go deeper into several areas for control purposes, but we're not going to disrupt the normal process that occurs within your forecast cycle. And so what that you get, and you can see in the fourth bullet point is, if you were to create a formula for your budget, it would be to say our budget should really be 80% of what we do on an ongoing basis to support our forecast, and 20% that's a deep dive into control. Now, any discussion about process and planning would not be complete without the discussion around the rolling forecast. Rolling forecasts become a very popular topic as we've moved from the Excel world, where rolling was very difficult because you would constantly have to update your templates, into a technology platform that enables the rolling to occur. Where we have clients ask is, what is the appropriate period? You'll see the reference to the myth of the 18 months rolling forecast. Why 18 months? Well, I think the default answer is more than a year and less than 2 years. And so we settle on 18 months. However, depending upon your individual company, your industry, 18 months may not make a lot of sense. So if you're Boeing and it takes you several years to produce a single plane, at which point you'll actually recognize revenue, your rolling forecast may be A, 5-year rolling forecast. B, it could be at a different level of detail. So rather than necessarily focusing on monthly, you could be focusing on quarterly or annually. Supporting that, you'll see the graphic representing Alcoa. Alcoa has been fortunate. It's been a client of ours for quite a while. And they pioneered a concept called the 6543 forecast. and it addresses both of those items of length of forecast and level of detail. In terms of length of forecast, it was decided that the company measures itself on earnings per share and return on capital on an annual basis. So consequently, a true rolling 6-quarter forecast where you have orphaned quarters or months that do not make a complete year have little value. So instead, as you'll see in the corresponding graphic, that they regulate it so they're always getting at least a complete year, and then when they move into the next year, get a complete look at the second year. So there's no orphan time periods, whether they be months or quarters. The other item was level of detail, and essentially saying that for the current quarter and the next quarter, we care about months. We care about monthly variances. We care about that level of detail. But beyond those 2 quarters, all outbound quarters, we don't want our businesses spending their time worrying about determining the values of month 1, 2, and 3 of a given quarter. Instead, provide us with that quarterly level detail. Now, within the world of the Oracle planning applications, and specifically their web-based data forms that allow input and entry, you're able to set up these web forms to accomplish both of those factors. First of all, they've got dynamic nature so that you can set it using variables and other controls, that you can roll it different number of periods based on your quarter. So you can have a 6, 5, 4, 3, or whatever would be appropriate to your company. Secondly, it allows input not just at the month level, but at the quarter level or the year level, and will automatically break it back to the underlying months. And so what that allows you to do is to tell your businesses, to tell your users, your owners, your customers, here is the level of detail we want you to focus in on a given quarter, a given time period. And again, to facilitate that, being able to allow them to enter data in at a quarter, have it audit the system, break it back to the month, or in some cases, especially if you're looking even beyond 2 or 3 years, at an annual level, and then again to push that down to the monthly detail. Number 3, standardize to drive diversity. Again, a bit of a conflicting message of both standardization and diversity, but it's founded on one thing. It's founded on, first of all budgeting and forecasting activity needs to ultimately serve the entity, the larger entity, whether you're a for-profit, non-profit, it's got to serve the enterprise. So the rules and requirements that the entire enterprise needs to judge your business performance need to be set up at the very beginning. So this refers to, here are the specific accounts that you need to budget or forecast. Here are the department levels that you need to budget or forecast, and establish those rules of the game. From there, you can then allow your businesses, departments to develop applications specific to their needs that will in turn feed this broader corporate model. There was a time, because of technology limitations, that the goal was to build a model that was all-encompassing. As a result, there would be data, there would be information in there that would be irrelevant to many users. So if you're in a sales and marketing organization, you may see that there is a vendor dimension because purchasing or the procurement department needs that, but it doesn't pertain to you. That creates an underlying confusion from a reporting, from input perspective of why is that information even in my application because I do not deal with it. The technology has now allowed you to actually deploy and manage easily multiple custom specific applications. So your sales and marketing organization can have an application. A business unit can have its own application that have their own dimensionality, data, calculations that are relative to how they run their piece of the business that in turn get moved into the corporate model using those rules that you've established and then rolling up to provide a complete enterprise rule. So again, the standardization is we need to set rules of the game, but then that will then enable others to go off and diversify and create very specific models that meet their needs while at the same time meeting the broader reporting needs of the entire organization. Number 4 is speed over accuracy. Now, The Hyperion platform and its underlying S-based engine is well known in terms of its calculation capability. Too often, people find or seek accuracy by increasing complexity. The larger I can make a formula that determines what revenue is going to be, the more factors I include, the more accurate I can get. Well, ultimately, it's actually speed over complexity that's going to drive how accurate you can become. And the reason is around assumptions. And so to bring that to life, if you look at the picture there of a driving range, the way most companies budget, and if I were to equate that to you've never golfed before, you're golfing in a scramble next week, you need to learn how to golf. The way most companies budget is they spend a lot of time researching, watching videos, reading books, understanding every aspect, creating that large formula that tells me here's how the perfect golf swing is going to go. But by the time I get through that entire exercise, I only have time for one swing, and that's it. And I'll take my next swing next year at the same time. However, if you take a different approach and say, we're going to seek speed, we're going to automate where we can, we're going to balance level of detail, we're going to leverage the system and its capabilities, all of a sudden you can shorten that preparation time to basically, I need to get the basics down. And from there begin swinging, and I can begin making my adjustments to improve my accuracy. So actually improving accuracy is about changing and adjusting your assumptions to become closer to the pin there. So it's one of those items one of those thought processes that will permeate through further discussions around driver-based forecasting, around zero-based budgeting. But if you leave nothing else out of this presentation today, it's to leave with the concept of speed will be one of the most important aspects in shortening the mechanics of the cycle to allow you to get to perform multiple versions. We all hear about the power of these tools to allow you to do what-if analysis. Unfortunately, we often see clients that develop such a complex process that's supported by the technology that they don't have time to do that what-if analysis. And so ultimately, again, that's what is going to improve your accuracy going forward. Number 5, starting with what you know. There's always been a movement to eliminate the zero-based budget, but how to practically do that, and is it appropriate everywhere? And that's where at MarketSphere we've created a methodology we call our seed, feed, and adjust. So we begin with the seed. The notion there is begin with what you know. We seed data, and by seeding, you were looking at your lines of your financial statement. So how do you see revenue? How do you seed your expense accounts, balance sheet accounts? The first is look to leverage actuals. There is a lot of valuable information in your historical actuals in basic trending, taking 3-month rolling averages, 6-month rolling averages as a very baseline as to what would the future lie gives you a starting point. So rather than opening up your template and seeing a blank slate, at a minimum, to open that template and have it pre-populated with data that's been based on historical trends as a starting point. It's also where you can begin utilizing your drivers, once again, to seed that data as a starting point. And I stress that as a starting point because it doesn't mean that you're locked in. So we have a line that says seed. The next is feed. So there's other systems that have valuable information. There'll be other existing models. You have an HR system. You may have CRM systems, project systems that all have valuable data that tell you, looking forward, where we think revenue, expense, other items are going to come into play. Adding that seed and feed line gives you a seeded outlook. So when your users open up, if you have a department, an IT department, and they open up their basic budget or forecast template, they will see a starting point, and they can drill down and see, okay, if I review $1,000, that I can drill down and see, here's what came from another system that we've already committed expenses to. Here's what we've seeded on an actual trend. Now, here's where the key thing comes is it's now time to adjust. So what you're asking your users to do is to understand the methodology that seeded the budget or forecast, and then simply adjust for what they believe the final number could be. So it creates a cycle where every ongoing budget forecast that we're providing the seed, they're doing adjustments. Then the key thing is when we go to do our variance reporting, again, our basic variance reporting will be final seeded versus actuals. What's that variance? We then have the capability to drill down and understand variances. Did the variance occur because someone made an adjustment? Had the adjustment not been made, we would have been much more accurate. Or do we drill down further? Did the adjustment occur because the methodology we used to seed, we may have used a 6-month rolling average, was inaccurate because it did not include some seasonality that we're now seeing, and that should be in turn changed to a 3-month average. So the next time that we roll a forecast and we do pre-seeding, it will have that new methodology and hopefully then become more accurate. So when we look at the seed, feed, and adjust, it is a way to acknowledge that we've got lots of data at our fingertips. We've got underlying calculation and database engines that can leverage formulas to give us a starting point, which, according to statistics, would have some statistical relevance to them. And then from there, again, asking our users not to start from a blank slate, but then to perform adjustments to get the budget or forecast to where they're comfortable. So again, number 5, seed, feed, and adjust. Number 6 is simplifying driver models. Again, technology is extremely powerful, enables for very complex driver models. However, too often, we can say, quite frankly, people can get carried away from their driver models. So we ask, when you look to develop a driver-based model, to simply analyze each driver by these 3 factors. One is logical. So a driver should be impacting a result. So if I see a driver and I look at what it's impacting, it should be a very logical relationship. It should be easily understood. The second is actionable. A driver by its nature should have the ability to influence it. Now, there are often drivers that would seem that you could not influence. In certain situations, especially in, for instance, the restaurant industry, weather is a major driver. But it can be influenced in the sense of you can plan to take actions that drop prices, change menus, based on weather and other seemingly uncontrollable factors. So you want your drivers to be logical, to be actionable. The final and the biggest thing is statistically relevant. We have a client. At one time, they were a manufacturing organization, manufacturing site. Their driver-based model had 25 drivers. I can tell you every driver was logical, and every driver was actionable. If you're in a discrete manufacturing environment, there is a lot of proverbial levers that can be pulled that would impact productivity, cost, revenue. However, when we did the statistical analysis, and the statistical analysis can be performed straight in Excel. It can be performed using one of their many statistical functions, such as R-squared, or it can be simply performed using your own set of eyes to see if we test out and look at the relationship between our drivers and the results, which ones are actually impacting. In this particular client's example, we went from 25 drivers to only 8. Again, those other drivers obviously had a degree of influence, but when you were looking to where you need to focus, they were creating noise in the formulas, they were creating noise in the reporting, when ultimately it was simply these 8. So leading practices, again, driver-based modeling, driver-based planning, it's a core fundamental part of making things faster. It's a core fund, which then goes back to our notion of seeding, giving people a starting point. The third part is to have these drivers to be understandable, reasonable, and statistically relevant. Number 7 is achieving true multi-currency. One of the big drivers to adoption of a planning tool has been with continued globalization of businesses and the need to budget forecast in more than one currency. And typically that would be defined as I'm at a location, I'm in, we'll say London because we know there's a big event there tomorrow. I have the British pound, I need to forecast in British pound, and it needs to be translated into US dollar for global consolidated reporting. That is what multi-currency was defined as. However, with the economic turmoil that's taken place over the past 3 years, and again the further globalization, that level of detail around multi-currency is no longer enough. I may be in London, and my official reporting currency may be in British pounds, but when I look at my revenue, half my revenue may be coming from British pounds, 40% being derived from contracts in euro, and 10% being derived from contracts in US dollar. I do not have or do not capture that level of detail in my forecast following a traditional process. Consequently, when I look to model what can currency impacts be, I have no forward look at the level of detail to allow me to model that mix for a given entity of what's their true reporting currency versus the other currencies that they're doing transactions, billings, projects in. And so what we've seen is our clients have now moved to building in that capability to be able to look at the mix and be able to test what's that fluctuation of these multiple currencies between one another, and in turn, how is that going to impact our reserve for foreign exchange impact. For many companies, this was significant in 2009, even to a degree in 2010. And so again, when you think multi-currency, it's the ability to give your businesses, your users, to be able to take not just one currency, not just two, but beyond that level of detail, so they have a better idea of their true currency exposure going forward. Number 8 of 11 is level of detail. Level of detail is always a very hot topic, and it varies completely company to company. I've seen statistics that say the ideal level is 100 financial reporting lines. Others that say that are 10. What we find is it varies by individual company, by size, by culture, by industry. So instead, our rule of thumb is to say, if you budget or forecast it, you need to be prepared to explain the variance. Now, we talked about seeding and such. To our business users, what we translate that to is, you begin with that seeded outlook. That's the given. We're going to come back. You need to explain any place where you made adjustments. Because again, our goal is to have the users interacting with the planning and the forecasting process in more of an adjustment mindset than a true creation from nothing to something. And so again, level of detail, it's simple. If we adjust it, if we budget it, we need to be prepared to explain the variance to it. Now, there are 3 areas, and I always like to use what's considered the cheesy iceberg graphic that you've probably seen many consultants use before. It is the very first picture of an iceberg that comes up if you Google iceberg. And so I think that's why it's one that's permeated many of our presentations. So while we talked about above the surface, keeping it simple, there are 3 areas for control purposes, and we come back to that theme of control for the budget, that you do need to go deep on. And that's revenue, your workforce, and your capital expense. So typically I have very complicated diagrams of systems interacting with it for each of these 3 slides, but ultimately found that Dilbert, in all of his wisdom, seemed to communicate the thought and the feeling of each of these topic areas better than any technical diagram. The first is revenue. Ultimately, revenue, it is the driver of the business. The revenue, what revenue you're going to bring in is going to determine your cost basis. And when we bring it down to very personal levels, revenue will determine the compensation of all employees within an organization. So it needs to be one of the major focuses. However, it's often a very manual process, lots of emails, lots of spreadsheets, and ultimately get to a point where you have a forecasted revenue number without a clean path back to why that number is that number. And that brings us to what we view as some common pain points, and there's several I would highlight here. The first is that reconciliation issue. At the end of the day, there is a forecasted number. How does it reconcile back to the opportunities within your CRM system, for instance? Is there that clear linkage, or is it a linkage that you need to follow across multiple spreadsheets and several emails to get to that? The other is waterfalling revenue. So a dollar sold today is not necessarily a dollar of revenue. We take our Boeing example. A plane sold today will not provide revenue until the plane is completed. For those clients that are in the services businesses, that contract, that sale of that service, that revenue is going to be recognized over multiple periods of time. We refer that as the waterfalling revenue. And so how can you automate, how can you systematize that waterfalling of revenue so there is a common approach and you can understand how a sale came in and how it translated into a degree of revenue. The final one of these, and we've talked about the currencies, billing versus performance currency, foreign exchange impact, but the ownership question at the end, it comes back to this. Because this process exists largely outside of a system, when you get to that final number, who owns it? And again, it brings it all the way back to where did that number come from? How do I reconcile to it? And where did that come from? So in terms of achieving integration, what the Hyperion and the Oracle platform allow you to do is to reach directly out into your sales organization, or rather their sales system, their forecasting system, whether they're CRM systems, so they're truly looking forward, or backlog systems, where you're tracking the revenue that you're earning on a go-forward basis. That data can be pulled directly into planning. It could be fed. So we talk about our feed to get to that starting point. This is where we're feeding data into it to say, okay, based on activity, here is our starting point, and it's now open for adjustment. Conversely, because it's now in the database, we have lots of control and clarity around it. We know where a number came from, directly from another system to our system, and then leveraging the fact that this is multidimensional, that I can then perform calculations, make other inferences to get to my end result. But I do have a clear path to tie back. So again, from revenue, it's an absolute trend for most of our clients of focusing, drilling, going deep into revenue, and bringing it into the system out of that Excel or other world. The one comment I will make is often when you're dealing with your sales organization, what we're actually encouraging them to do is now just to focus on their home systems, focus on their CRM system, their Siebel system. We'll bring that directly in. They no longer have to maintain a separate spreadsheet that they're keeping up to date, separate from their home system. So it's actually going to enable them to focus just on one area rather than trying to balance keeping their CRM up to date, keeping up their backlog files, and then keeping up a spreadsheet that is their revenue prediction to submit to corporate. Workforce. So revenue drives the company. Workforce, associated headcount and compensation costs are without a doubt the biggest cost in the vast majority of companies today. Again, it's also a very personal cost. And so it's something that we take very seriously. And again, when you look at the Dilbert on here, you'll certainly, I think, appreciate some of the concepts of workforce. Common pain points, multiple methodologies. Depending on within your own business, you may have departments, businesses that look at individual headcount and costs down to the named person because they can. Others, it may be just groups of individuals by job function or by their total department. And then finally, you have those that just focus not even on necessarily number of individuals and what we're going to increase compensation of, but just strictly at that compensation total. So we expect an increase of 4%, so I'm going to take total comp and increase it by 4%. you have multiple methodologies that once again, when it comes time to make a decision, we've had an excellent year. We're now going to be able to expand our bonus program, compensation programs. What is the impact of those? Within your organization, if you have multiple methodologies going on, in an offline environment, it's very challenging to understand where that lays. The other key one is privacy concerns. So these systems, and we'll be speaking here directly about the workforce planning module that's available with Oracle Planning, enables you to import your employees and their supporting detail, so salary by employee. You can alternatively bring in employees by group, by job function, and have total salary. That's very sensitive information that's being brought into a system, but it's a highly secured system. Today, in many cases, likely it's emails that are circulating around with spreadsheets with your department's employees' names and their salaries. I think we've all misforwarded information before in the past. That is information, the same information that can be contained within a secure system that is floating around via email and other mechanisms. And so certainly privacy concerns are always an issue. The final item to point out your common pain point is usually when it comes to employees, it's focused purely on compensation, direct benefits. But there are lots of other expenses that employees have, from technology-based expenses to new hires don't just start with only compensation. There may be recruiting costs, there could be T&E costs, training costs, others that you want to associate with those new hires, and want to place rules in to give you a much better look at what is our true cost related to each individual head, both new and existing within our organization. Within the planning world, the starting point is workforce planning. I can say confidently that probably at least 90% of clients over the past 2 years who have purchased planning have opted to include the workforce module. It provides basic out-of-the-box functionality that allows you to pull in your employees and their key information, and from there generate your budgeted and forecast utilizing that information. I will tell you that it brings a new light on the quality and the accuracy of your HR data. So making sure individuals are located within HR in the appropriate department. Do not underestimate the time that you will spend on that aspect of a workforce project, is making sure that because that data is now going to be the starting point, that it's accurate and it's timely and it's refreshed. Other items that it allows you to do is it allows you to both manage at the detail level or at the summary. Similar again to our seed feed methodology, once you've loaded in these employees, it will predict their salaries and costs going out as far as you need it to. There is no reason to take action. So you may have 20,000 employees. You may load all employees. There is no requirement to actually take action to look at individual employees unless there's a change. Otherwise, you can reload the data on an ongoing basis, and it will automatically refresh your existing employees. It will notify those employees have left, an updated salary, and other related expenses. So again, a workforce provides a very powerful tool that when you look at that compensation line, it gives you the capability and the confidence that that compensation line is truly the total of individuals throughout your organization, both new hires and existing employees, and their associated costs. The final one is capital expenditures, capital assets. Again, one of those items that's something that needs to be planned on an annual basis versus an ongoing basis. And it is, as we quote here, very disruptive activity. By its nature, it requires not just financial information, but written information. Ultimately, by the nature of the product as well, is that when you're doing your capital expenditure planning, you're looking to get the most you can from the dollars available. So you begin with, obviously, a number of submissions and requests that are far greater than you can fund, and you begin whittling them down. At the end of the day, once you get to that final list, you're going to need to be able to track those projects, those capital assets, understand the depreciation and the cash flow impacts going forward, and then how are those asset balances going to be reflected on our balance sheet. Those 5 items become very complicated when you're having to do everything within an offline Excel-based process. The notion of I have assets, here's my list of assets, my grouping of assets, I'm bringing new assets on, I'm disposing of assets, transferring assets, and now I need to understand that cash impact and understand allow depreciation to flow. Again, every company has a different way of dealing with that, but in general, it is very disruptive. On an ongoing basis, it becomes very challenging. Many of our clients, as a result, they calculate that depreciation once at budget and just use that as a standard throughout the year versus allowing the system to calculate that impact of depreciation in cash based on the activity for a given month. So the starting point here is Oracle has a module called Capital Asset Planning. It is designed for fixed asset forecasting. I make that difference, call that difference out from capital projects, which have different requirements. So the capital asset module truly is designed for organizations that are fixed asset oriented and want to be able to track, predict, and influence what they're doing with those fixed assets over time. For those clients that are looking for more of capital projects versus pure assets, that is where you're leveraging the existing basic Hyperion planning application. In addition to Hyperion will also be rolling out a capital projects module that will be pre-configured and pre-built similar to capital asset and the workforce modules. Going to number 10 of the 11 here, this is where we deal with reporting. To begin with, the key theme here is one of the major benefits of the Oracle solution is the powerful reporting and flexible reporting. You're able to get out of making the investment of time to get an accurate and to get your budget and forecast information out of the spreadsheet offline world and into an application. The major benefit then is the ability to instantaneously report that information. Now, when it comes to reports, often a report is someone points to an Excel file, or they may report to a report generated from their ERP system. We actually define up to 6 different types of reports. They vary from dashboards and scorecarding. They include production reporting, which is ongoing, very standardized, that needs to be shipped out on a monthly basis. Interactive reporting, where you can drill up and down and explore data. Analytical reporting, where it's often your red book, your blue book, your green book, whatever book you refer to it, which is that monthly or quarterly analysis that includes extensive commentary. Transaction reporting, which again is you often refer to your ERP system for that, which is, let me see my AP transactions, my AR transactions. And then finally, ad hoc reporting, which is the purview of probably many on this call of we have an issue, we need something explored, so I don't have a standard report that meets those needs. So here we see 6 different types of reports, all that will be utilizing potentially budget and forecast data. Oracle, when you purchase Oracle Planning, it has, I'll call it the Standard 3. The Standard 3 major reporting tool sets available to you. Oracle Financial Reports, which is your production quality, pixel perfect reporting. Oracle Web Analysis, which is your web-based reporting, true web-based reporting. And then finally, Smart View, which is the integration of the underlying Oracle information with Microsoft Office, of which the key aspect of that is the reporting out of Excel. Without going into each intersection, what you can see is based on the type of reporting you need to do, certain tools are better fits than others. And what does that mean? First of all, it means many of us, again, live in an Excel world. Excel is not the greatest for everything. In purchasing these tools, it's to leverage the outstanding Excel integration with the database, but it's also to look to financial reports where you can do standardization and creation of report books. It's to look to web analysis where you can do some real dashboarding and scorecarding that and allows especially executive users to explore the data in a very web-friendly environment. All 3 of these products, and the reason that they come together, is to support different users and different reporting needs. So as you go forward, again, whether you're existing, new customer, looking at your technology and deciding how are we going to approach reporting, bring a very open mind and understand what is that we need to report, and now what is the most appropriate tool for that reporting. The final slide is change. As we've talked about these concepts, driver-based, seed, feed, adjust, speed, workforce planning, potentially lots of significant change within an organization. And you need to be prepared for that on day one. I believe many companies have gone through large-scale implementations in the past and have realized the need to focus on change at the beginning, not just at the end. Now, while there's a lot of change management concepts, there's really 4 that we put forth to keep in mind. The first is communication, and the key thing here is to eliminate panic. Too often when a new system is going to be brought in, hey, we're going to change the planning process. We're going to improve your reporting. The immediate panic is everything I have today will not work in the future. We need to eliminate that and say we will have a plan. This is going to occur over this stated time period. That will, again, relieve that initial panic. However, at the same time, the same communication message is being brought forth by senior leadership and supported that you'll have time, but change is coming. So you need to be prepared for it. You need to plan for it. The second is education. That's training. Training does need to occur depending upon the depth and breadth of your user base, previous experiences, how they're going to be interacting with the system. Are they purely report users? Are there people that will be actually doing what-if models? They'll need different types of training. You need to plan for that training and look at the different delivery methods. The different delivery methodologies available. There's traditional, physical, in-class training, train the trainer, web access, multiple options that are available to facilitate that training. Again, it's something that needs to be considered on day one to give your users adequate time to get familiar with the system, begin reporting, interacting with it, and the training cannot certainly be undervalued. Foundation is the concept of there needs to be ongoing improvement. You need to have a core set of users that are communicating with one another and determining how to continually improve both the process and the system. Within this line here, we always point to Microsoft SharePoint, which is a very common tool most companies have. They'll have project sites, they'll have departmental sites. That's where you should have the Oracle Planning Team site. That's where people should be able to submit questions, ideas, understanding, to create and foster that communication. Because it is a powerful platform, and it's a platform decision. And so to come out and have one release of your budget and forecast and call it a success and not seeking continual improvement would be shortchanging your investment. And to do that, you need a group of individuals and a platform from which they can focus. And then finally is motivation. The old system is going to go away. The old process is going to go away. What better motivation than there is something new that is coming into it? But at the same time, it needs to be monitored. So there's 2 things that we encourage or ask you to consider. One is having individuals pass an internal exam before granting access to the system. There's outstanding training tools. The user productivity kit from Oracle that allows you to have very interactive training. It also allows you to test users. So you need to achieve an 80%, and then we will provide you an ID. Now, it sounds extreme because we're not used to that, but truly this is very sensitive, valuable financial information that we're granting users access to, and there should be a baseline understanding of the process and the technology to gain entrance. Finally, just continuing to monitor it. Often you'll have a third-party firm such as ourselves will come in and produce a core set of reports that are available on the workspace. If you go back 6 months later and it's only that same set of reports and no new reports have been developed, that either indicates that those were truly the greatest reports ever created, or more than likely, shadow processes have been developed. Perhaps users got very excited about the Excel reporting capability and consequently have defaulted to there and have not kept up sufficient development of financial reports or web analysis. So it certainly needs to be monitored and encouraged on an ongoing basis. So with that, those were our 11 for 11. I know the question's always, will there be 12 for 12 next year? hopefully. But I hope you get something out of it. Again, key things to remember, first of all, it is a journey over time. We presented 11 leading practices. I think you need to look and evaluate which of those will be applicable to our situation, and how can we sequence and plan and build a process and build a subsequent system that will get us to this point over a period of time. And then I leave you with, kind of my two big S's. One is speed. Deploying these systems, they can become very large. You want to keep the quickness. You want to create an agile environment where you can truly change, model, test, see results. And then again, the seed, feed, and adjust. The concept of preceding information, allowing your users to adjust it, and then in turn, evaluate the results that way. All of that will, again, allow you to be speedier. So that was it for the prepared comments. Mark, questions?
Yep. Thanks, Brian. At this time, I'd like to open the call to answer any questions. As the screen says, to ask a question, just please open your chat window within WebEx and send the message to all panelists. As we wait for questions to come in, Brian, I have a question for you. You talked about the importance of and the value of Oracle's workforce planning module. What would you say are some of the top things a company should be thinking about when they are considering workforce planning?
Sure. Probably the biggest one, and I mentioned during the call, is the quality and availability of your HR data. And so often that many of us who are on the phone or finance people, that we are used to dealing with a general ledger, which is a highly regulated, often it's very looked at quite a bit. HR data often can be a bit more on a lag. And so looking into that HR data up front to understand its overall accuracy and how it's updated, absolutely critical, because that'll be the first time you load that data in. The other thing I would encourage is understanding where you need to look at data or information and predict it at the individual employee level versus where can you look at things at a job code or a job function level. In many instances for our clients, those that are, I'll call it frontline, those that are not overhead departments where they directly influence revenue or there's a direct relationship between revenue, they're often dealt with more at a total level, more at a job function level, because there's some up and down. However, the overhead departments, SG&A, that's typically where we find the individual focus, because it is purely a cost, and so there's a lot of focus around level of detail and analyzing those costs. So if I were to say the two big things to look at is quality of your data, and then secondly, the level of detail that you feel you need to analyze across the different components of your business.
Another question here is, what are some of the specific enhancements of the new Hyperion planning release that would support some of the best practices that were discussed here today?
Sure. The biggest thing, the latest release, there was a release last year, and now they just came out with an even newer release, is the increased look and feel of the application to users that makes it much more Excel-like. And so throughout this, we talked about seeding, feeding, and adjusting. We're really focused on variances and exceptions. The latest version, the 1.2 release of Oracle Planning, when you interact with the data forms, it now enables lots of conditional formatting, the ability to have various formulas built directly on the forms that will enable the users to quickly see, where do I have issues? Where do I need to tweak information? And so when you look to that, how do I implement these best practices? A lot of it is around how users interact with data, and the 1.2 project has really created a user interactivity level on the main data forms, which how users interact with the system, that has really brought it to be so much more like Excel that it will create a greater acceptance by your users, as well as give them a lot more information.
Okay, great.
And I do actually, I'll ask one other item within the latest release that's worth mentioning is process management. We talk a lot about ownership throughout here, ownership of numbers. The process, the workflow management engine within 1.2, again, has been very improved. So it allows for customization. So if you are the owner of your IT department, when you've completed your forecast, you can then send it on to corporate finance. If that goes to that individual and that individual is on a vacation, it actually automatically knows it and will send it to someone else. So it completely integrates now with very practical tools such as Outlook and such, so that that theme of process management and ownership that we want to embed in all of this can be practically applied in the more advanced workflow engine that they've provided with the new release. So yeah, good questions.
Okay, any other questions at this time? Looking at the list, if there are no more questions, I'd like to conclude the session. Certainly, thank you for your time and participation. This session has been recorded, so you will receive an email early next week with the link to the recording. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your day.